Please welcome the panel on Trading Spaces, Rekindling Global Economic Collaboration, moderated by BBC News Singapore Bureau Editor, Maura Fogarty.
All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us at the Milken Institute panel discussion, Trading Spaces. We have a very distinguished panel with us today. I'm not going to go through all the individual bios because you can see that on the app, but I will say that sitting to my left are individuals with decades of experience in public service, government, as well as in the private sector, with special expertise in the supply chain, the global supply chain, as well as in global trade patterns and global trade policy. I'm also not going to spend too much time talking about the state of the global economy or global trade, because I think that's a topic you're all very familiar with. But I will say just a couple words before I launch into my first question for everybody. And that is that we are at a point in time right now where we're seeing geopolitical concerns and friction in a way that we haven't seen in decades. We are seeing that's playing out as increasing rising protectionism, global trade barriers being put up, national security concerns now encompassing economic security as well, and with that rising fragmentation of the global trading order. The Director General of the World Trade Organization said a few months ago that protectionism is a huge threat to global business. I'm going to quote, I know Shogun won the Emmys earlier this year, the historical Japanese Japanese language drama as well, I should say, won the Emmys earlier this week, but I'm going to quote one of my favorite TV dramas, Game of Thrones, and my favorite line from that series is, "Winter is coming." So I'm going to pose that as a question to all our panelists here this morning. When you look at the state of global trade at the moment, how much do you agree with the statement, winter is coming, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being that you most forcefully agree with it? And I'll start at the very end with our first panelist, Jacqueline Poe from the Economic Development Board.
Thank you very much, Maura. As you well know, Singapore is a trading nation, a trading hub. We're a heavily trade-dependent society. Exports are up this quarter, and that's a good thing. Especially for electronics, but we are extremely conscious of the fact that there are some serious headwinds in terms of what was for us a rules-based, multilateral world order underpinning sort of free trade. And so Singapore is based on trade and based on connectivity. On the other hand, we've been watching this set of trends play out for some time, and I'd like to offer a counter quote from Game of Thrones to you. That maybe guides a little bit about how we think about this. And that is, chaos is a ladder. Chaos is a ladder. So no matter what happens in terms of these trends, with a little bit of agility, with a little bit of the ability to actually shift gears, it is also possible for companies, and global companies, to take advantage of what is probably a fragmenting world in many respects. So, for example, global trade to GDP has gone down between 2022 and 2023 from sort of about 33%, I think about 31% to 29%. So clearly there's less trading going on as a percentage of GDP compared to before. But the reduction has been sort of slight, and in certain areas actually it has increased. And within Asia, that is one of the areas in which trade has increased. Another statistic that's worth noting is that global foreign direct investment actually fell last year. In other words, fewer countries invested in other countries. And that was true of every part of the world except Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia was the only part of the world where FDI flows actually increased, and they continue to increase, and Singapore was a fortunate beneficiary of a large chunk or large bulk of those flows. So even though we are facing more headwinds from a far more geopolitically contested, fragmented, maybe even deglobalized system, there are opportunities, and we have to find ways to make the best of them.
Thank you. Lord Mandelson.
I think I'd give it a 7.
7.
I'm afraid. Because I think that rather than facing a ladder of chaos, we may well be at the top of a slide. And no sooner has your bottom touched the top of the slide, you gather momentum, and before you know where you are, you're at the bottom of the slide. And so I think we're leaving the summer of peak globalization, and we are entering the autumn, and I hope very much indeed that we don't reach the winter, because I think that trade remains the most important driver of economic development, of poverty reduction. Trade is the transmission belt through which prosperity moves from one country and one set of people to another. But it's clear what has been happening. I mean, we have enjoyed 3 or 4 decades of a boom time in trade, and it was as if during that period sort of geopolitics had been suspended. It was as if we felt we were on a sort of one-way journey, that we were on an inexorable journey, and this will just continue. And what's happened is that public opinion, geopolitics, have kicked in again and put question marks over the future of trade and the future of globalization. There have been very many more winners in the world from globalization than losers. But nonetheless, I speak of my own country and Europe. There are many people now, countries, regions, local communities, individuals, who feel that they've lost out from globalization, and they look at the sort of borderless world that we've created and think that rather than a great opportunity for them, this is robbing them of their livelihoods. People have become more worried, fearful of the rise of China. The way in which China's economy has grown and the way in which China has assumed such a large dominant place in the international trading system, and question whether China is trading fairly. And then there are great events like that which we've experienced in Europe, the invasion by Russia of Ukraine, which right up until that point saw countries like Germany and other European countries dependent on Russia for a large part of their energy supply, and suddenly they wonder whether globalization is safe. This sort of interdependency that we have between countries for such critical supply is safe anymore, and that's why we're seeing national security considerations kicking in as a cornerstone of public policy, to an extent replacing what has been the main cornerstone of policy over the last 3 to 4 decades of business efficiency. We've in effect created a giant global efficiency machine, and it's that which is now being questioned, and we can come back and discuss why and what we're going to do about it. But I think the danger signals are flashing on the global dashboard, and that's what we've got to address.
Thank you. So let's get a perspective from the private sector, from someone who has supply chains all across Asia and the rest of the world. Ho Renhua is the CEO of the Taiwan Group. Do you agree it's a 7, or are you above or below that number?
Thanks, Mara. I think I do share Peter's general concern. So I would say, since he's laid out a 7, I'll be slightly more optimistic and lay out a 6.
Okay.
With optimism bias. And as Jack laid out the analogy of the ladder and the analogy of the slide, the only thing I can offer is I've got 2 young kids, so I think global trade is for like a bouncing castle. You've got any of you have got little kids, you go to like a play area and you go to like a kids party, it goes in ebbs and flows, and it's kind of like a bouncing castle. I think 2 perspectives I can offer, coming from an industry experience where we operate, across 7 countries and 10 operations, is I think the classic notion of free trade theory, so to speak, and whether we have different price equilibriums. Is undergoing, I think, quite a monumental change, right? We think about price equilibriums, if we think about the theory of advantage, whether it's comparative or competitive advantage, I think concepts of technology disruption, whether it's led by AI, it's led by labor disruption, and I think themes of climate really, make me ponder and make us think that, the concept of, how do you actually have a competitive advantage and how do you actually have a comparative advantage differ by different industry supply chains. The reason why I think I'm a 6 and slightly more optimistic in this sense is I think different industry supply chains would have a different response to the advent of AI and climate. Starting the most technology advanced, whether you're in semiconductors or pharma, to medium technology where we operate in the space of food, or low technology, whereas in the concept, let's say commodities. I think, trade generally can, still have a lot of that, classical theory of how you actually, gravitate, supply and demand to different advantages of different countries. The problem is that once you have the unknown predictability of climate and climate resilience, then it really disrupts the supply chain flows and it's harder to reach that price equilibrium in trade theory. I think in semiconductors, AI, pharmaceuticals, they may be a bit more insulated from that. But certainly in medium technology spaces which we operate, so we operate an agri-food value chain across Asia Pacific. We see a lot of market signals across China, India, Indonesia. I think in that sense, I think that concept of the positivity of trade, I think still continues because your price equilibriums are less disrupted by AI and climate. So yes, I think I'm a 6. Optimistic that I think in different types of technology disruption, it goes through ebbs and flows. And next time, you go to a kid's party and you see a bouncing castle, you can think about the promise of trade. You bounce up and you bounce down.
Okay, thank you. All right, and with that, let's move on to Eno Ebong, who is the representative of the U.S. government. She also heads the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, and get your perspectives as well.
Thank you so much, Maura. I think partly reflected by my jacket color, I am an optimist by nature. I wouldn't go so far as to say we're in the summer, but I think I'm also at a 6 here because from my perspective, which is that of an independent US government agency that is focused on developing the infrastructure for trade, I see a very clear attentiveness to these issues. And when you look at the practicality of what we need to do to piece together a trading system that is fair and that is open, certainly from the perspective of building the partnerships to do so, from the perspective of building the collaborations, the coalitions that you need to do so, from the perspective of ensuring that emerging economies, which are very much part of this dynamic, are not left out. That is what gives me some of the optimism that I feel. And hopefully we'll get into this a little bit later. But, competition is real. I think I don't so much default immediately to protectionism, but that we've learned some very real lessons from the pandemic. And what we need to do, and that people much more experience on supply chains than I am, but to secure those. And yes, Peter is right in terms of national security, but this all comes with a determination to communicate, to have intensive diplomacy around this so that where there's potential for fissure, we are actively trying to avoid it or trying to mitigate. So I think with that notion of, yes, competition is real, but managing that competition in a very real way with strategic partnerships that affect all participants in a trading system, I think that we can strive to head off the winter in a very practical way that takes policy and translate it into action. And I hope to be able to elaborate on what some of that is, at least from the context of the United States.
Thank you. Gareth Brooks heads up the global supply chain for VF. Apparel and footwear is their main business, so they really do have a global footprint. Gareth, we have a couple of 6s and a 7. Where do you stand?
I think I'm in the 6 range as well. Certainly it feels on the basis of tariff and non-tariff measures that are being put in place that there is a move away from the globalization. I think for those of us that are running supply chains, risk management's a really big consideration as well now. So be it from the pandemic, the conflicts we're seeing in Ukraine and in Gaza, it's forcing us all, I think, to really think about how our supply chains are constructed, where are products made, where are they consumed. The challenge that we face, though, in terms of, well, where do we go next, is that for many of us, we've spent 10 or 15 years disaggregating our supply chains, seeking the lowest cost, most optimized way of working, really on the backdrop of really stable, low-cost logistics, which we've not really experienced since before the pandemic. And we were talking this morning, logistics reliability globally remains a big challenge for many businesses, irrespective of where you're shipping. And so I think there is that drift away from globalization, but where do we go next isn't always so clear.
Thank you.
Maura, can I just
jump in? Sure.
One postscript. I think that considering the scale and nature and extraordinary impact of the global pandemic of COVID-19 we went through, and how the potential that had for disrupting international trade and interrupting the normal flow of trade and supply chains. I think the most remarkable feature of COVID-19 is that supply chains, in the main, worked. They worked. I mean, food, pharma, all the staples of our life were not derailed. Our reliance on supply chains actually worked. And I think that's quite a remarkable feature of the global trading system, and one that we shouldn't lose sight of, because I think it's a real value. I think it's a real testimony to what we're in danger of losing if we take a wrong turn, a wrong course in public policy.
So let me just pick up on that, because the reason why I think the supply chain worked was because of adaptability, and that companies and governments were forced to become much more adaptable in moving goods across the world. If I can just go back to Renhua and Gareth here, what is the single biggest way your organization has had to adapt to what you see are these changing forces shaping trade?
I mean, I think first I agree with Peter's point that it worked in terms of once you had the physical closures and the reopening of ports and hospitals and roads, it definitely worked. But what we also saw as a consequence of it working, of kind of reopening, is obviously you got inflationary spikes. And some of those inflationary spikes, they can last of different time durations, right? In certain sectors, an inflationary spike may last 3 months, it may last 9 months. In certain cases in food, it's a bit less because crops, they tend to produce every, twice a year. So the inflationary spikes, comes and go. How do we think about resilience in terms of building supply chain capability? I think the most important nuance right now is really very focused in country specifics and regional specifics. So a very concrete example in the large markets where in China and India we spend a lot of time really understanding and deepening on the local logistics, because that's what you can control. We can't control the FX of the Thai baht, and we can't control the freight rates from Bangkok to Shanghai or Bangkok to Mumbai, but we can control exactly how do we think about building logistical excellence within India, within China, within Indonesia. The second thing I think it's moving in a slightly more positive direction is kind of harmonization of cross-border. So we work a lot with the industry advisors, and we've had 2 new administrations coming. So there's a new prime minister in Thailand, and there's also a relatively new prime minister in Cambodia, and then Vietnam is also going through a leadership change. But the ministerial level, in terms of dialogues with some of the key leaders, I think there's generally positive momentum towards harmonization of some cross-border flows, whether it's transportation, it's tariffs, it's custom duties. So within the intra-ASEAN region, which is a very important agricultural hub for Southeast Asia, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, I think remain quite positive that will go through certain harmonizations. Certainly not at that level of the EU in terms of a very clear established policy-making body, but in terms of really advocating lower friction, lower cost. So as industry leaders, I think we can do a fair amount of trying to push the needle on where conversations can be held in terms of advocating things to be faster, better, cheaper, and ultimately just working with the different macro considerations. I think in our part of the world, the evolution of supply chains in the large markets will be very important across sectors. So whether it's high-tech semicon in China or medium-tech, food in India, or it's kind of commodity supply chains in Indonesia, I think those will have a very pronounced impact on the overall Asia-Pacific flows.
Gareth?
Yeah, I think for me, so if you think about the brands within the VF portfolio, last year my organization, we supplied about 270 million products back to the corporation. And we're a lifestyle fashion business, so we brought 85,000 new products to marketplace, a massive complexity. The only way we can get that done is through a really good network of manufacturers on a global basis, and not just here in Asia, but in Europe and in the Western Hemisphere as well. And I think pre the pandemic, we'd always spent a lot of time thinking about risk management and contingencies. The pandemic, though, helped to flush out further through the system some of the single points of failure. So I'll give you a really good example. Southern Vietnam went into a 3-month lockdown. Some of the factories were able to keep running, but all of our goods used to go through one single logistics entity, which when the country was operating was really great. When the country isn't operating as normal, that's a bit of a problem. So I think it's helped us to identify those single points of failure that exist within our supply chain, and then how do we bring contingency against that. I think the balance between our global footprint's also really important, because that's allowing us to respond to consumer demand. As I mentioned earlier on, it's not just the tariffs that we see coming in against certain product categories or the non-tariff barriers. In some cases, there's consumer demand as well, and an expectation or a requirement to buy product that's locally produced. So leveraging our network of suppliers is enabling us, I think, to be able to deal with those headwinds as they come along and be agile. But we're having to think so far out. There's a lot of conversation inside inside supply chains at the moment about China plus one. We're already way beyond that. We've been talking for some time about Vietnam plus one, because as the textile, apparel, footwear industry, we're often a first mover into developing countries. And by the time electronics and automotive and others come up, we're on the verge of being pushed out. So we're having to think so far ahead, which is where the global trade construct is so important for us, and where having a framework in terms of trade agreements and support mechanisms, be it like AGOA in Africa, is so important. Because that's the catalyst for businesses like us and our partners to then begin to look seriously around how can we develop an industry in a part of the world where it hasn't previously existed. And that's a great way to bring employment and industrialization to lots of places.
So let me just segue over into industrial policy then, and go back to Jacqueline here. Singapore has been very successful as a small, open economy, very dependent upon the global trading order, benefited greatly from open markets, again, open borders. What are some of the challenges that you have seen in terms of trying to position Singapore, and opportunities as well, because you talked about direct investment coming into Southeast Asia, growing, and that being the only region in the world?
Maybe I'll talk about opportunities first, and I'll see if I can link that to what Gareth mentioned. Since the end of COVID, we've been seeing an increasing number of companies put their headquarters here. In fact, a doubling of the number on an annual basis in the last year. Many of these companies have chosen to put their global supply chain hubs in Singapore. And that's for a number of reasons. It's not simply because of physical connectivity. Physical connectivity exists here. I mean, the airport, logistics and freight, and then linked to PSA, the Port of Singapore, which has got a new Tuas megaport. which, especially with the Red Sea crisis, was very, very full, as you know, way above the normal capacity, because a lot of freight volumes come through Singapore. And it's very, very hard to replace container shipping freight with anything else, certainly not easily replaced by a railway in terms of the volumes, certainly not easily replaced by even air freight, especially with the crunch in the number of planes that are being made these days. So Singapore continued to be a really good hub for physical connectivity. But increasingly, we became a hub for digital connectivity. And by this, I mean there is an assumption that when you go into supply chains, it's a very logistics play. But supply chain management now is a highly data-driven, highly digital, highly AI-enabled process. So what we've discovered is many multinationals who've been put in, like semiconductors, consumer goods, chemicals players, all who put their, or biopharma, all have put their supply chain control towers in Singapore are doing it because we are able to access the kind of data that you need to control a very large vendor network and the vendors of your vendor network so that you can switch it over quickly and be very, very cognizant of whether or not it's a climate disaster that has happened, it's like a natural disaster, or whether it was a geopolitical event that took place that causes you to have to swap your vendors. So in Singapore, at least you would be able to have the data to be able to orchestrate that in a far more nimble manner. So one of the big opportunities for us in the midst of all of this has been the anchoring of supply chain control towers from Singapore, and we're really looking for more of them to come here. This is not to say that I think a lot of challenges for industrial policy do exist. For number one, as I mentioned to some of you, we've been doing industrial policy for 63 years now in Singapore. We did it when it was not sexy, way back in the 1970s. But now, apparently, it is incredibly popular, and many other countries are looking to build out their own industrial policies and putting in a lot of subsidies into certain industries. Now, those could be for purposes of national security. It could be purposes of, sort of just economic competitiveness. Either way, it's if everybody does it, it's going to be highly distortionary, and there will be a fallout at some point of time. But we also have to compete for our fair share of investments in this kind of environment. So for us, it is a very competitive environment. We have to move a lot faster. We have to find new forms of competition, for example, in the kind of talent we can get in Singapore, the kind of openness that we have, the respect for intellectual property or the predictability of policies. So a lot of these things, and especially in R&D and innovation, and really bringing our sort of top-class university to bear, become the new pillars of what is important for a high-end industrial policy. So good and bad. We roll with the punches.
You roll with the punches. If I can just go over to Anno really quickly here, because you raised the issue, Jacqueline, of connectivity in Singapore and Singapore having more of these anchors of control towers being placed here. I know connectivity and infrastructure is a big push for your agency, but can I ask you, to what extent is that being driven by U.S. foreign policy or geopolitical concerns?
It's really interesting. So the agency, the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, has been in existence for over 30 years. So we've always been focused on supporting infrastructure development by taking that de-risking posture. It's really expensive, it's really risky to develop large infrastructure in areas like clean energy, transportation, digital, and healthcare infrastructure. And so what we do is go in at the early stages and support by grant funding project sponsors in emerging economies who are trying to test the concept or the idea and make sure that it's bankable. So by piloting feasibility studies, technical assistance, we do this in a way that brings in the best of US innovation technologies and solutions, so that these projects can get the investment to stand up. So that's just the core of what we do. And I think as an independent government agency that's essentially an implementing agency, we absolutely respond to the foreign policy initiatives of any administration that is in office. So absolutely, in our administration, the Biden-Harris administration, the focus very much has been on infrastructure. Yes, in strengthening, I think in quite a targeted, sensible way, given what we learned from the pandemic, our own domestic innovation and development and research, which really hadn't been focused on for decades, and so was much needed. And then for us, we take the policy, but from the international perspective. So it is important to have partners around the world in emerging, that is, developing and middle-income countries, who, as I said earlier, can participate in a global trading system, and it takes sound infrastructure to do that. And so our emphasis has been on climate-smart infrastructure, consistent with our administration's goals, and has been on partnering to effectuate our work. So just an example, and I'll mention two initiatives that very much focus on the Indo-Pacific. The Indo-Pacific framework, actually I'll do PGI, the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, which is looking at, along with our G7 partners, what we need to do to catalyze and mobilize capital for infrastructure development. So USTDA is working with partners, Australia, Japan, New Zealand, others, to make sure that our work in the Pacific Islands, ensuring connectivity, for example, is key so that they can participate. And so, yes, absolutely, our foreign policy goals very much tie in to our goals as implementers, but as an agency that's focused on infrastructure development, it's been very natural and very consistent to do so.
Thank you. Peter, in your current role at Global Counsel, when you talk to your clients, what's the single biggest issue they're bringing up with you at the moment? And then corollary to that is, do they also feel that government is on their side in helping them to solve these business problems?
The single biggest issue that people raise with me, businesses raise with me, is the trajectory of government thinking and government policy. And whether a belief in free trade, dynamic markets, business-to-business relations, supported by public policy, is at risk of being in decline and being replaced by a rather blunter, less sophisticated idea of industrial policy, which is not so much about sort of resilience as, America first, Europe first, Britain first, a way of distorting markets and business decisions and supply chains in order to use public policy for the sake of national advantage. And I think the fear that businesses have is that what is in a sense a sort of a natural evolution in which trade, or the growth of trade, is to an extent following geopolitical lines. Trade is growing between friendly nations, if I can put it like that, which does have a cost advantage. I mean, if you reduce the length of your supply chain, then arguably, you are more efficient, certainly from the point of view of sustainability and climate. But I think their fear is that the growth of trade amongst friendly nations, if I can use that shorthand, is the beginning of a retreat behind national and regional borders. It's not so much a source of dynamism and evolution, so much as protectionism and economic nationalism. And I think that is a real concern when you see, for example, in Europe talking about the need for strategic autonomy, code for protectionism. When you see in the United
Much more subtle than the Americans, let's just say.
Sorry?
Much more subtle than the American language.
Oh, wonderfully more nuanced and sophisticated in language than the Americans, but of course amounting to the same thing. And you have the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS Act, and then you have an evolution of export controls, tariff taxes, investment filters, new emerging instruments of public policy, or should I say government control of trade and investment. And the reason this worries me is, first of all, because I think the countries that are employing these tools, they're a sort of form of sort of checkbook capitalism, if you like, are not necessarily increasing the net efficiency, if I can put it that way, in the operation of their economies. But I also fear that public policy tools used by advanced economies in that way will operate to the disadvantage of emerging economies, developing countries, and frankly the poorer people of the world, because in a sense what we're doing is trying to sort of stave off relative decline, amongst our own advanced economies at other countries and other people's expense, and that worries me.
Thank you. Let's just switch gears a little bit and maybe look at a more optimistic opportunity that might be out there for global trade, and that's technology. And I think a few of our speakers have sort of spoken about that. But I'm curious, especially in terms of artificial intelligence, because that is such a buzzword right now. Executives I speak to talk about how they're trying to understand how to implement AI in their own businesses, trying to understand what's reliable, what's not reliable, and how they can use it. Let me start with you then, Gareth, and say, how do you see that as an opportunity in terms of either collaboration, opportunity, increasing global trade?
Yeah. So I think from the supply chain perspective, we have massive amount of data inside of our global supply chain. So be it AI, machine learning, anything that can do to help us cut through that, make more informed decisions, I think has to be a good thing. I think as it extends to our broader industry, perhaps one of the opportunities, but I don't think anybody is brave enough to go there, is really around visual AI, and when do people start to use AI to create new products? Now, the big challenge, as I see it, is that the intellectual property or design rights, there's no policing of that at the moment. So certainly I don't expect anybody soon to lean into that, but I do see that as an opportunity at some point on the horizon once the governance gets resolved. In the meantime, many consumer companies are selling online, so we have direct access to our consumers and to their feedback. So to be able to use AI to aggregate and distill that down to make better decisions around our product, around supply, around our go-to-market, I think is a good opportunity for us.
Benoit?
I think there are aspects of, there are different aspects across the spectrum of AI. I think certainly there are aspects of AI, data centers, semicon, which are probably a bit more subject to national security concerns, and those are kind of like the very high-value strategic defense industries. But in our space, at least in food, manufacturing, consumer, we're seeing a lot more use cases and momentum AI for the general common good. And by means, the general common good is ultimately for the consumer and for the producers. There are certainly aspects of climate resilience. I think we need to scratch the surface of understanding analytical capability and predictability around climate resilience, climate data, capturing data around sun, renewables, water, soil. We've not even started, even as an industry or community, to even scratch the surface, and there's so much more that can be done. There's a lot of great work and innovation. Singapore's ASA's leading there around the microbiome, around gut health, around food. So I think that the level of AI just to be as minute, as granular as possible for the sake of innovation. I think on one hand, yes, there are certainly more sensitive industries in regards to national security, but also broadly across many aspects of food manufacturing, consumer, industrial. I think there's a lot more leverage for AI for the common good, for industries to work with government bodies to really drive a lot more of those innovation outcomes.
Okay, Enna, what do you think?
I think certainly from project preparers, from a practitioner's point of view, you already are seeing it in our projects around the world. Everything as diverse of trying to implement AI to help the logistics at ports in Côte d'Ivoire, for example, to again help that flow of trade, to using it in cancer diagnosis and treatment at the King Hussein Center in Jordan, which is another project we're working in. So it is definitely seeping in very much, and we are paying attention to how we can support it, again, in those economies that are developing, but equally so need to be equipped to be able to participate in the trade flows.
Do you want to weigh in, Jack?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I think Singapore is very forward on AI. We've announced our national AI strategy, a second one, very much focused on use cases for AI and increasing demand for AI amongst the public sector as well as the private sector. So we are looking to partner with sort of 100 companies to become AI centers of excellence in Singapore. We've put in $1 billion. We've committed $1 billion to make this happen, to provide the compute that is needed, also to provide 15,000 AI experts as talent to make this happen. And it really is to improve and create new products as well as to improve productivity among our businesses. Now, Singapore can, I have to say though, and I'll link this back to the topic on trade, Singapore can afford to do this because, our disadvantages in many cases, which is demographic, as in we don't produce a huge number of babies, and possibly fewer than we would like, is an advantage for us in the adoption of things like AI, simply because we don't have a huge labor market to be able to find jobs for, and our unemployment is at 2%. So AI for us, automation, AI, robotics, it is a boon. It is a huge benefit for us. But I will say that there are many countries for which AI will reduce jobs. It will fundamentally transform the employment landscape. It's already happening in terms of call centers and customer service in many companies, and therefore in some countries, including in ASEAN. It's happening for coding and software development. So last year, the statistic was that 30% of all software development could be done by AI. I've seen huge advances in the amount of software that can be tested and built by AI using natural language. Just build me this, and it comes out. And I can only imagine that is more than 30% now. Some numbers have been going all the way up to 80%, which means that extremely proficient developers will be enabled by these tools, and many others will not be in quite that position. So just to remember that in terms of protectionism and wanting your best for your own population, ensuring employment, AI for many countries, including developing countries, will be a bit of a challenge. And if it ends up in a situation where the protectionism that Peter has already alluded to and the fragmentation of the trading system actually just becomes a little bit more problematic, then there are also going to be effects that are widely felt.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left, but I'll let Peter
Can I just advance two messages on the back of what Jacqueline has just said? One is a message for government. Use industrial policy instruments to stimulate research, innovation, development of technology, and its take-up and diffusion into the economy, rather than using public policy to protect and to disrupt international trade. And secondly, a message for business. You have a big responsibility, in my view, not just to navigate your way through these sort of difficult geopolitical currents and shifting patterns of trade and globalization. You also have a responsibility to educate governments in the importance of adaptability, nimbleness when it comes to trade and supply chains. So for businesses, they should be both navigating and educating.
Thank you. We've got about a minute left, and typically at the end of panel discussions, I'd like to ask each of the panelists to very briefly indicate what is their one single takeaway from this discussion. I'm going to phrase it slightly differently this time and say, if you were to be notified or given information that you're getting $50 million added to your budgets this year, 50 million, nice sizable number. And
million or billion?
Million.
Oh,
million.
Just being hopeful.
Which currency is that?
Yeah, well, okay. So $50 million, and the outcome is you had to prove that the end of whatever you're going to do, that global economic collaboration would increase in some measurable way. Mm-hmm. What would you do? How would you use that $50 million? I'll give you about 10 seconds to think about it, and then you each have about 15 seconds to answer.
I would build off other people's innovation and inventiveness, build off other people's infrastructure, for example, other people's large language models of artificial intelligence, rather than thinking that you have to replicate and do everything yourself for yourself. I would stimulate interdependence rather than trying to replace it.
So you would invest in these types of companies?
I would invest in those companies that are building off from other people's innovation and inventiveness in order to create a competitive advantage for myself.
Great. Who's next?
For me, I would look to digitize further into our supply chain, because I firmly believe as we look ahead, particularly in consumer goods, traceability is going to be really important. And so as we get further through the supply chain, all the way down to fiber, raw material level, understanding being able to trace up and down the system is going to be very, very important in the future for consumers.
Who's next?
The 50 million, is it profit or non-profit? Are you supposed to make money?
However you'd like to interpret that.
I would.
I'm a real businessman,
You want to go? Or are you still thinking?
No, after you.
I would actually, a little bit of a combination. I would build on the innovation, bringing in the private sector, as we do actually, in a project that could demonstrate the kind of collaboration it takes to stand up infrastructure. It would be along a corridor so that there would be a number of countries engaged, something that we are starting to do. But at the end, you would have a project that people could see and understand that we are concerned and focused on our partners in developing countries and making sure that they are present in and partnering with us in our objectives.
Jackie?
I would invest it in people. Actually, I would invest it in skilling and reskilling of people to cope with an AI-driven, tech-driven world. And because, there will always be these concerns about competitiveness and fragmentation, I would invest it in other countries' people as well, including in our neighbors, to ensure that, the levels of skills are upgraded not only in Singapore, but also in our partners in ASEAN.
This morning I was actually at SMU, so I'm actually part-time. I'm joining the adjunct faculty in the strategy team, and very similar to Jack, I'm a big believer in the multiplier effect of education. So to answer your question, whether it's for-profit, non-profit, kind of like a slightly bold idea, if I had $50 million blank check, I would set up 3 campuses in Singapore, Shanghai, and Mumbai. We focus on a very innovative, interdisciplinary education around biology, finance, and the liberal arts.
Okay, so we started off with winter is coming, and the panelists all ended with $50 million to spend. I'd like to thank them very much. I'd like to thank all of you very much for joining us today. Thank you.